Hello, class. This is week 6, our second video, in order to further brief you on our second project, the DERT Children's Storybook. So I just want to kind of go through this in order to give everyone a good idea of what this project is about and how you can begin the process, and kind of give you a good place to start so that on Thursday when we meet again, you'll be ready to present your basic research and your general concept for your storybook. And in our last video, I kind of talked in detail more about the first half of what we're doing in this transition week. This week, we're finishing our baby board books while beginning our second project, the children's storybook. So as I talked about in the last video, which you can watch and see more details on the YouTube page, but just quickly to review in case you didn't see that, I need everyone to kind of finalize their books, apply any last minute revisions or edits, go through it one more time, and then to do some production things to make sure you do spell check, to create bleeds on each page of the book, on each spread, and to package the files so that all the fonts and links are included. That's super important because we want to send this to the printer and we want to have everything in order and not have missing illustrations or JPEGs or TIFF files or fonts that aren't there. Just a quick reminder of what I was talking about in the last video. The bleed is this area that represented by this red outline that's outside of the edge of the book. And it's just an additional area for a printer to be able to have room to trim and not be super accurate if needed. So what I need everyone to do is to make sure that you go through every spread of your book, and that you, if you didn't have a full bleed, that you extend your box out, or more importantly, if you have an illustration that's bleeding off the edge, that you make sure that that's accommodated for. So please make sure you do that. Once you've done that, once you've spell checked, once you've gotten everything finalized, and if you have to share with me, please share with me any final design changes or text changes that you need my help on. Once you've done that, all you have to do is save your file and then go up to File and hit Package, and you'll get a prompt, and you just have to make sure everything's there, that your fonts are all there, your illustrations are all there. Again, as I talked about last time, this font may not be included, the Accidents Grotesque, the DERT font that was part of your template. It's not showing up on some of your layouts. I understand this has happened in years before, so don't worry about that. We have that font here, and you don't have to worry if that's missing, but make sure any fonts that you have are there. For example, if you see a little red square there, this font is missing from this file, and we would need to have to contact this person to get that font from them. So make sure we avoid that kind of back and forth. And just to reiterate, all of this on Canvas is your assignment sheet. We're doing 2 assignments this week, so make sure you do both. So this is the final file Canvas page, and in the text here, you see that there's the template in case you still use the template. There's a PDF that talks more about packaging your InDesign file, and there's also a link here to the Google Drive where you need to place that by next Thursday. Let me know if you have any questions on that. And here's the baby board book file on the Google Drive, and also below it, you'll be using this one too for your research project for your children's storybook for the first part of that assignment. So I've talked a little bit about this project in our last video, but basically we're going to be working on these children's storybooks, as we call them, or just storybooks. And there are 8x10 books. They're paperback books. The page numbers are not fixed like they were last time. We don't want to put too many pages, but basically there's a little more flexibility. There has to be, I think, at least 16 pages and maybe up to 36, somewhere in that range. The more pages you add, the more expensive it is. And we want to make these not too much that they're accessible to everybody. There'll be a few restrictions like in the baby board book with the DERT logo and some other areas we'll talk about shortly. But the first thing you should be doing now, and some of you have already done this, but you should be putting together your list of options on the class Miro board that I created. Basically, on these gray tiles are a series of stories that I've selected that are options for stories or story prompts for you to build your storyboard, your children's storybook based on. And the options you have here are to select a book that you literally want to design and illustrate as it was written in sort of the classic text that you find for this. Or you can take a classic story and update it slightly and revise it to be similar to the original, but a little more updated in the language. And then your design approach could be done in a new and different way. Or you can choose to kind of take that story, use it as a prompt, and rewrite it in a new way, kind of building off the themes and the lessons and the characters and on the basis of the story, but creating it in a new, interesting way. Or you could just create your own story concept, this last tile here, and develop a story that you think would be an effective children's story. Of course, that's a difficult thing to do if you're not experienced at writing, so be careful about that. But if you can present your concept, and if it makes sense, and we can obviously make that work. But I'll show you an example of that as well. But here on the left side, all your names are written, and this has already been done. Half of you guys have already done this, but basically you take your name and you put it right over the tile of your first choice. Take your name, put it on the tile of your second choice and of your third choice. Please do this by tomorrow night, Sunday night, so that we can know what our books are by Monday morning, and you can have time to work on your research project on your deck. So here we go, a close-up of it. And each of these links, or each of these small texts, are links that either link directly to the text, or it may link to a page that talks about the story and the text isn't formally there. But the key is to give you access to more information about each story so you get an idea of what they're about. And as you'll see, some of these stories are clearly children's stories, but others, like Transfiguration, may not be traditional children's stories, but are written. This is from, let's see, this is for the Transfiguration is from Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women, and there's several of her poems as options here. And to have those become written as kind of classic children's stories that are read out loud in this more poetic way, and something that we can illustrate and design based on the text from that era. So that I think there's something interesting about that. And there's also stories from specific cultures, like the flood myth of the Incas, and some of you are from these cultures. There's some Chinese folktales as well, and you're welcome to. What I need to say is giving anyone from the class who's from the culture, like Sophia's from Peru, and I believe she wants to do this, so she gets first choice on that. Well, let's apply that to anywhere else. But also in the option of creating your own story is another option of finding a folktale from your culture that is not on this list. And I don't mean this list to be the only story you can do. So if you are aware of, or if you were told a story that you want to bring to life, or if you want to research and find a story from your specific culture, I highly encourage that. And in fact, I prefer that. So don't let this list throw you off. If you want to do a story, you don't have to write your own story. You can find your own story and revise it. And I'm going to show you some examples next that will help you understand what I mean by revising it. So right now you need to be choosing your story option on the Miro board. Pick 3 choices, put your name on the first, second, and third choice, and then I will be letting everyone know tomorrow what your final book will be. So let's take a look at the books before I get into the research tech assignment. So I'm going to switch off here and go to our blurb page. This is the blurb page for DERT, and I'll put a link. These books and many others are on this page, so you can use it to take a look at what we've done in the past. Unfortunately, I can't hand you these books to have you look at them, but here's a place where you can page through several of our books and get an idea of what we've done in the past. So this first example, Aesop's The Lion and the Mouse. This is an example of pretty much taking a story that exists, that is very old, from the Brothers Grimm, I believe, or no, from Aesop, of course. And it's a story that is well known, and it's kind of a classic tale. And basically, you're sticking to the story, you're illustrating it, It's not updated except maybe in the text or maybe in the attitude or the approach of the text, as well as the illustration style is obviously unique and 21st century. So this is actually one of the first books we did. I think it is maybe the first storybook we did. But the Lion and the Mouse, and here you see that it's illustrated in this kind of like loose, sketchy way that's different than the traditional kind of refined or vector kind of drawings you see, which I really like. And the approach overall with this book, as I get back to the front, is to create the story in a way that's visual with short pieces of text that can be read aloud or it can be read by an older child directly. But before we get into that, a reminder, we're going to have the DERT logo in a specific position here in the bottom left corner or bottom right corner with a white box around it. You'll be given a template like last book. And this is the inside cover. So this is part of the cover, but this is page 1. And page 1 is going to be a page from DERT that's going to look just like this, except it's going to have your name down here with this year's date. And this is something you can't change. We have our scribble, which is kind of our little watermark. And it's not for you to change, or you can't make it pink or anything. Page 2 and 3 is going to stay just like this. Page is going to stay blank, but there will be your name and where you're from, as well as your concept will be written here. So you might want to read these to hear the way they put their concepts into words, as well as a little promotion. Like if you have a website, you can put your website here. And normally we do photo shoots, and I'm sad that we can't do photo shoots because you're not here in New York, and my friend Wes shoots these pictures, and it would have been great to do that with you guys. It's lots of fun, and the results are great. So we're going to find a way that everyone shoots your own portrait or provides a portrait from where you are. I'll get into that later, but you'll put that in here. The DERT logo's down here. It doesn't move. You don't change color. This page doesn't get touched except for your picture and the text. All right, so the book starts here on page 4-5. 1 was the scribble page, 2-3 was the page we just saw with the bio, and this is 4-5. And a good thing to start with, to keep in mind when you begin storyboarding this, which is not this week, but to note that there's something called the title page, which is kind of like the opener. Sometimes it mimics the cover, sometimes it teases you into the story. And with the approach from this designer, it was a little bit of kind of adding a little bit of keeping the text of the story more traditional, but having this little bit of secondary kind of activity going on with not quite speech bubbles, but with thoughts and words coming out of the two characters. So this is the title page, and why do I keep doing that? Okay, here we go. This is the title page, and this is the first spread. And again, this is about a book that's going to be 8 by 10, so it's kind of like pretty big, and it's going to be about like sitting down and either reading with a child who's a little bit older, or having that even older version of that child reading on their own or looking at it on their own. So the text is kind of done in a classic way here, with the, it not being like purely old-fashioned. It's probably been updated a little bit just to be clean and easy, but the text is not a big part of this concept. The way it's written, it's just more meant to be the classic story. And again, the idea here is to even bring to life thoughts, emotions that don't even involve the formal text. So there's a few spreads in this book where they're dedicated just to like action and words and emotions that aren't part of the formal text. So we start off with this idea of the mouse kind of getting caught. The text is pretty simple with a few lines on each spread. Here's a spread with no text at all. That's just telling the story, which is like a nice way to utilize the format of the book. Again, we have like this idea of this specific kind of text that comes from the mouse. It's either an emotion or a short word like help. And it goes through the story, more of the same idea with the haha and the few down here. And you can see sort of these are being used as spreads, telling the story with the pictures, but also with just short text till we get to the end. And part of the thing that helps with a lot of these books is they have these sort of like little, I'll call them montages, where you have little illustrations that you have to kind of put together and see like kind of this time lapse of things happening. Continuing the idea of using this kind of text with the sound of the thump when it falls. And then with books like this, where they're kind of old fables and they have a lesson to write out like basically what the lesson is. And here it says, to remember, little friends may prove to be great friends. in order to bring the idea of a fable and a lesson learned from the books and bringing out the value from the story. And then at the end page is an option as well to kind of finish it off. And then at the very end, the last page will always be this more children's books by DERT kind of page that shows other books that are available. And so that's one version. That's sort of the traditional story done more closely to what the text was intended to be, which is small updates. And this next idea is similar in terms of the format. It's a classic story, another Aesop's fable. And the text style is different on this one. Again, we have the first page and the second and third page specifically kept to the format, a title page. And then this becomes a little more vectorized. This becomes something where the illustration style is more cleaner and the text is a lot more interpreted towards this book. It's still the same story, but it's definitely not like old vintage text found online that we just simply use. It's this person kind of rewrote it to be shorter and more personable to her own preferences. So you can read through this and just see what I mean, but you can see they're just simple 2 or 3 lines of text on each page. The illustration styles are really modern and graphic, and tells the story using conversation between the two characters, and telling the story through simple vector and drawings and bright colors and friendly type in short big bold bursts. And repeating, you being smart about how you utilize your assets, where this whole setup is there and you just have to kind of change it, kind of like a stage. And going through it, and of course you could, same idea here with the stage, you can go through and read it to see how the story is written, but it's something that everyone here should be able to do, or with some help can do it. And again, the lesson at the end. Okay, and then another example is taking a classic story and then creating a sort of new take on it, a new spin, a new point of view on it. And this is the story of Little Red Riding Hood, but right off from the start, the title is different. It's red instead of Little Red Riding Hood. Still signifying the idea of what the Red Riding Hood story is about, but you can't necessarily tell from this cover. It's more modern and interesting and bold. These pages are the same. Like I said, here's your title page, and it does sort of wrap itself around the classic story. But in the approach, the graphic approach is very simple and minimal. Things like, the look of the character was considered not being overly feminine, and also being multicultural. Could be, doesn't have to be, isn't a specific race because she's blue. And then basically the story is rewritten in a way that's modern and positions Little Red Riding Hood, and I did it again, positions Little Red Riding Hood as a strong, independent young woman or young girl who is visiting her grandmother, does encounter a problem with the wolf. And the brilliant thing about this is kind of one of these stories that you might think that's just too gruesome. How do I handle it? But Cindy, the designer, in this case, never really shows the wolf besides these kinds of symbols of them, like the footsteps and or paw prints. And here you see that Little Red Riding Hood is a person of action and shows bravery and tries to solve the problem through her own skill sets and determination. And again, the style is really simple, so it doesn't have to be something that has to take a lot of time, but it has to be done well when it's simple. And again, this strategy of like never really showing too much detail, and they're in a cave and it's just a black arch, and you don't ever see the wolf. You just see sort of, it implies it's the wolf. It's just takes the scissors and pulls grandma out of the cave, not out of the wolf. you don't even see grandma, you just see parts of her. And again, kind of repeating things and connecting to the classic parts of the story, like what big eyes you have and all the better to hear you and that sort of thing. So it sticks to the story, but it interprets it in a way that is still the story, but is got another spin on it. And the conclusion is that Red was, took care of grandmother and was seen by her community as strong, and wasn't called little anymore. She was just Red. And at the end page. And then one or two more. Now this story is Sleeping Beauty, and again, it's a title that is a familiar classic story. But in this case, the story was converted quite a bit. It kind of kept the idea of it being about sleeping and being about a young woman who's sort of trapped in a sleep, but she doesn't get rescued by a prince kissing her without consent, but instead goes through an experience. First, it's in modern times, and it's not a medieval story. It's set in today, and basically she sleeps during the day and loves dreaming and has a relationship with the moon, and has a kind of a beautiful time being in the sleep mode. And with the style too, I think it's important to see that this is kind of, although this is a complex looking spread, it's really built on very simple elements. And for those of you who are not feeling confident about illustration, this is really a way that shows that you can do quite a bit with simple shapes and elements, and the use of bold colors and type. All these pages are actually quite simple. So again, the character is in a sleep state and sort of enjoys her dreamy life and is friends with the moon, but the moon convinces her to experience the daytime and gives her a little taste of it through these aurora nights or lights at night. And she's convinced to experience the day and comes out of her sleep mode and understands there's a new world at the daytime with the sun, and becomes friends with the sun in the daytime, and makes for just a beautiful poetic book for bedtime. So it takes the story, it has similar elements, but it does not follow the premise much further than kind of taking a few key elements. And then the last example I'll show you is an example of creating your book and writing your own story, but writing your own story based on something that influenced you, or something that you've heard, or something that was told to you, or something you find in your research, and there isn't necessarily text, but there's kind of a premise. So this is a story that I actually remember hearing when I was like your age. I don't know where I heard it. I think it was maybe a speaker somewhere, like a TED Talk kind of person. I researched it and I tried to find it and I couldn't find it. But I really always was very influenced by it and thought it was kind of a cool story. I believe it's from India, and it's the story of a boy who lives out in the jungle, and he has a happy life, and he goes to sleep, and when he sleeps, he dreams that he's in the jungle and that he's wandering around, and while he's wandering around, he encounters a tiger. And this tiger is quite scary, and a challenge to him, and something that he's it's about the fear he has to face. And in the dream, he runs from the tiger like any smart person would do, and then he wakes up and he has this dream over and over again where he would fall asleep and have a tiger coming after him. And eventually he gets to the point where he dreams this, and instead of running, one night he doesn't run, and instead he decides to turn, and the boy decides to turn and face the tiger. And when he faces the tiger that night, the boy becomes a man. And this book is about that idea. And here it kind of wraps it up by saying, from that night on, the boy dreamt of running, not from what he feared, but towards what he desired, the end. So this is an example of a book that you can take from a story you've heard or a story you make up. But the idea, if you're bringing forth a story, for DERT, we're always trying to come up with some way to help kids understand life and understand the challenges in life, not be afraid of fear or death or things that are not good, not celebrate them or make, we're not making scary books, but instead help use stories as a way to understand what other people have done, that you're not alone, that people have fears, that people overcome fears, that there's ways of living your life that you could be prepared for this. And these books and these stories are meant to help kids understand that. So any story that you find or you come up with or you choose is going to be about some overall strategy to help making navigate through life better and easier and more fulfilling. So have that in mind as you select your story and you design your book. And of course, think about how you're going to illustrate this. And just to be fair, this book is watercolored, and it's probably something you can do in class, but this was done by a student who became an intern and worked in my office and had probably maybe more time than you would, but who knows? But it is quite detailed, so don't be freaked out by that, because this was done as an internship. But I don't think, if you plan it well and spend the time, I don't think that it's overly complicated that you couldn't each do this. But it will take dedication and planning and following through on the process that we do together. Okay, so that's basically it for these examples. I'll talk more about examples in upcoming video lectures. But for now, I think the focus is going to be on you selecting your book, and then beginning the process of doing research on your story, and being able to make a deck that, let me skip this now. This is all text that's going to be on it's on the canvas. But basically, you're going to make a deck that's a research concept deck. I only put research because I know there's a lot to be done this week. So depending on how much time you have or how far along you get, you have the option of at least being able to prepare a deck that shows what your story is, shows the background about it, talks about what the story's morals or themes are about, and then shows some research on past iterations of how the book or the story or the character may have been done in past books or past illustrations or paintings or anywhere that they were shown as visuals, and then to begin the process of doing research on what's your design inspiration, from illustration style to typography to colors, and then writing a basic approach, your design concept in writing. So I just put here a quick example of that. This student worked on a story called The Little Half Chicken, and she wrote a summary of what the history of the story was and where it came from, and then over here on the second page, it was like what the actual story was. And I believe this may have been even kind of like a draft of her text. It's like showing the style. And then we get into the design inspiration. Oh no, then we get into like, how has this story looked in past applications or past designs or past illustrations. And some of you may not be able to find this. And so if you have a book that you just can't find anything on it, that's okay. And maybe that's actually really good, because that means this is a chance for you to create a book that doesn't really exist. So instead of being bummed out you can't find a past iteration, it's good news. So, but there's probably something, and it's just interesting to see how this has been done before. And then we get into just sort of the key ingredients to your design, and you might not know what you're doing yet. This is to help you get to that point. So start thinking about the kind of styles you want illustration wise and typographically, and color palettes, and just your overall look and feel. And then just kind of write out an approach to how you want to work towards your book, what your book's going to be. And again, You may not know, you may have a general idea, and that's okay. This is part of it. And then the week after next is where most of this should begin to come to life. So do your best to kind of get as much of this as you can get done. But the main thing is to do the research on the story, to understand what your story is about, and critically to understand what the theme is, what is that you're trying to bring across with the story. And then think about what your approach is going to be like, whether you're going to stay traditional with it, whether you're going to want to modernize it slightly, whether you're going to want to take the basic themes and rewrite it completely and make it a new take on the book, or whether it leads you towards even a whole new, it could become a prompt to a whole new idea. And based on the story you selected, you've come up with a new story. That's also a possibility too. All right, so that's it for now. There is a Canvas post for this. I didn't put it on here, sorry, but there's a Canvas post. And on that post is the link to the Google Drive to make sure you put that in the Google Drive. And I'm also going to put the DERT blurb website link there so you can look at the other books in case you want to browse through those more. All right, great. Looking forward to seeing you guys on Thursday. Please make sure you go on Miro and pick your top 3 books. And if you don't, I'll be picking them for you, so don't let that happen. And look for an email from me on Monday morning, depending on where you're at, Monday morning in New York, to let you know which book you're going to be working on.